Well, thank you for inviting me, and I want to use the time that's allotted me. Is it fair to say I can go on for roughly an hour? Is that okay? I'm not sure who the organizers are. Okay. So I want to use the time that's allotted me to try to clarify exactly what's going on. And in this particular case, it does require a certain amount of clarity because virtually everything that's being said about the current round of Israel's massacre in Gaza, virtually everything that's being said is simply not true. Saying it's not true is just the euphemism for saying it's a lie. And I think it is important to have some clarity on what actually is happening, what triggered it, what's happening now on the ground, and where things are headed. So let me begin with the beginning, namely the context of what's happening. And it's important to get the point of departure right because we have to know what was the cause and what was the effect. We're told that the cause was the kidnapping and then killing of the 3 Israeli teenagers, and the effect was Israel's harsh reaction in the West Bank. That's the sequence. Virtually every account begins by saying it all started with Israel's, with the abduction and then killing of the 3 Israeli teenagers. But that's flat out false. The only proper context for understanding what happened is it began in April 2014 when Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, or Fatah, they formed a unity government. Well, after they formed the unity government, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, he demanded that the United States and the EU break off relations with this new government because Hamas was a terrorist organization. Surprisingly, the United States and the EU said they would proceed to negotiate to work with the new government and then would decide on a step-by-step basis whether or not to persist in this relationship. At this point, Netanyahu was enraged. He was being consistently ignored, first on the question of Iran, when he claimed that Iran was on the verge of becoming a nuclear power and that Iran was threatening a second Holocaust against Israel. The United States and the EU persisted in its negotiations with Iran. And now on his home ground, on the question of Israel and Palestine, once again he was being ignored. He was saying Hamas is a terrorist organization. You have to break off relations with it. Both the EU and the US said no, we're going to continue in our relations. In fact, when the gift fell into Netanyahu's lap, the gift being the abduction and the killing of the 3 teenagers, but initially the abduction, even after that gift fell into Netanyahu's lap, the US continued to say, we are not going to break off relations with the new unity government. Well, now Netanyahu had a pretext. He knew full well from day one that, number one, the kids were dead, and number two, Hamas had nothing to do with it. But he saw an opportunity. The opportunity was to exploit the abduction and killing of the 3 Israeli teenagers to do what Israel always does. When Israel wants to break off what Israelis call a peace offensive, these nasty Palestinian peace offensives, because now Hamas had signed on into the unity government, and the unity government had said, because Prime Minister Abbas was the spokesperson still of the unity government, he said that we are accepting, as the unity government, we are accepting the EU-US terms for negotiations. The terms were, number one, renunciation of violence, number two, recognition of the state of Israel, and number three, it just slips my mind, it'll come back to me in a moment. Hamas had joined a government which accepted, recognition of all past agreements. So it was renunciation of violence, recognition of all past agreements, and recognition of the state of Israel. Abbas said the new unity government accepts those terms. Hamas had joined the new unity government, and then by inference, Hamas was accepting the terms of the EU and the US. So Netanyahu has a big problem on his hands. It's one of those periodic Palestinian peace offensives. And as Israel always does, and it's not peculiar to Prime Minister Netanyahu, it's typical of the Israeli government, whenever you have to confront one of these peace offensives, the way you try to deflect the peace offensive is you start pounding and pounding and pounding the presenters of the peace offensive until they react violently. And so now Netanyahu had his pretext, the abduction and killing of the 3 kids. He then started going after Hamas in the West Bank, arrested about 700 Palestinians, I guess about the majority of them being Hamas, ransacking homes, demolishing 2 homes, and carrying on, as it always does at these moments, like a hooligan state, carrying on these rampages until Hamas finally reacts. And when it finally reacts, as it did, as anyone would under those circumstances, what does Netanyahu say? Look, you see, I told you, they're terrorists. You can't negotiate with them. In fact, this is a particularly odd situation because, in fact, it was not a Palestinian peace offensive. Ironically, this was a Palestinian surrender offensive. Prime Minister Abbas of the Palestinian Authority, he accepted all of Secretary of State's conditions for ending the conflict during the negotiations that were carried on what was called the Kerry Initiative, or the Kerry process. Abbas accepted that Israel could annex the major settlement blocks. Abbas accepted the nullification of the right of return. It's perfectly clear from the record, or what's been leaked from the record. He accepted everything. He accepted a defeat. But Prime Minister Netanyahu, because of coalition politics, he wouldn't even accept a surrender from the Palestinians. And so now he was determined to wreck the unity government so at some point in the future he wouldn't have to accept not a settlement based on international law, because at some point in the future he wouldn't have to accept a surrender from the Palestinians. Well, after the rampage in the West Bank, it gradually escalated, and at some point it turned into the ground invasion. I made many predictions along the way before the whole conflict started, the current round, about what would happen. And many people will no doubt recall that one of my predictions was, I thought it was impossible that Israel would be able to repeat what it did during Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9.